All right, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Coleman, Chair of the Subcommittee to Study the Affordable Housing Ordinance, and I'm so happy to have you all joining me tonight. I really appreciate your commitment to trying to work with this really important issue. The Affordable Housing Ordinance is nearly 20 years old, actually, so I think we are very much due for a review here, and I really appreciate you all taking the time over the next couple of months to not only get to know some of the history of how the Affordable Housing Ordinance came into being, but also having discussions amongst ourselves to get a sense of where should we go moving forward and how we should improve upon the affordable housing ordinance so it better reflects current market situations. And I want to start off first by just kind of introducing ourselves to one another. I'm familiar with several of you, but I think given that today is going to be a shorter and more conversational meeting, that's worth us just taking some time to kind of just build relationships with each other. So I will start with the first person to my right, which would be Greg Van Wee.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Van Wee. I'm a Senior Vice President with Jefferson Apartment Group. As the name implies, we're a multifamily developer, owner, and property manager with multiple projects, both past and present in Arlington County, most of which I've been personally involved with. So hopefully can bring a little bit of the industry perspective to the conversation. And then we're also active, including other projects that I'm personally working on in other jurisdictions, both locally and up and down the East Coast. So can maybe bring some ideas and commentary from how other places are approaching this topic as well. So look forward to the discussion.
All right, excellent. So then I will move it over next to Eric Berkey.
Sure, I will come on camera in a few minutes when I'm able to. I'm juggling some parental responsibilities. So thrilled to be here. I think I've been waiting for 10 years for this conversation. I know we have friends here who've been waiting for much longer. So Eric Berkey, I'm here representing the Planning Commission. Proudly was a member of the Housing Commission for many years, including serving as chair. So thrilled to be here with you all. I think this is a conversation that's, there's been much interest in having for quite a few years, and I'm unsure where this will take us, but very happy to have this under the auspices of the Housing Commission and certainly have support of our staff. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Moving over to Russell.
Thank you, Brian. Russell Denow Schroeder. I'm a principal planner with the Housing Division in CPHD. So I've been with the county for 12 years now, and over that time, I would say my understanding of the affordable housing ordinances has definitely evolved during that period of time. I know that in my interview, it was one of my questions to the interview panel was somewhat on the actual how the ordinance was actually functioning and playing and working out. So it's long been on my mind, and happy to be in a supportive role for this group.
Thank you. Next, moving over to Audrey.
Hi, I'm Audrey Kramer, and I am a commissioner on the Arlington Commission on Aging, and I chair the Housing Committee. And we're very focused, it's not the only thing we do, but on affordable housing, particularly for older adults. And we are always interested in ways that we could expand the number of affordable housing units in Arlington. We're seeing things in other counties and cities that make us jealous. And so I'm hoping we can move forward. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. Regionally, I know Fairfax has sometimes been the envy of many people living here in Arlington. So I appreciate us taking a look outward and trying to improve ourselves, right? Uh, Next, go to Jason.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Schwartz. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I am serving on the Housing Commission with Brian, so look forward to being in this group and helping shape the future of the ordinance or any other ancillary ideas that come up.
All right, thank you. So moving over to Matt.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Weinstein. I'm a land use attorney in McGuire Woods. I've been the co-chair of NAOP Arlington's committee since 2020, and I'm here in that capacity today. But I am also a longtime Arlingtonian and member of various Arlington commissions. I'm on the Economic Development Commission right now, previously on the Transportation Commission and the Electoral Board, and also used to work in General Assembly. So if this goes down the path of needing Richmond to get involved, which it probably would if you're changing the ordinance, I certainly have familiarity and contacts down there. So I'm familiar with the process and very excited to see where this comes out. I've been involved in affordable housing projects in Arlington, both for completely 100% committed affordable projects like Terwilliger Place, and also I've seen it for market rate projects that seek bonus density, like a project I'm doing right now. So quite familiar with the ordinance and looking forward to the discussion.
All right, thank you so much. Next, moving over to Alex.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex McMillan. I'm a development specialist with Arlington County Housing Division. I do a lot of work on the market rate site plans. I also am the liaison to the Housing Commission, so I am helping this working group with logistics, so public notices, sending out the team's links. If you have any questions, please let me or Brian know. So happy to be here and help out. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Michelle.
Hello. Hi, I'm Michelle Winters. I'm not a member of the commission currently, but I was at one point for a while a member and a former chair. And I guess I've been doing this kind of stuff in Arlington. So that was like, I guess I started on the Housing Commission like 18 years ago or something like that. It was a long time ago. I've been working on housing issues for over 30 years in my regular career. Mostly national up until about halfway through, and then local here in Arlington and statewide in Virginia since then. And so in those years that I was on the Housing Commission, that was the early years of implementing the ordinance. So we had to work through a lot of the ins and outs of how it applied. And back in those days, we actually had to have every single project come to several meetings and discuss all of those ins and outs and before it got all figured out. And more recently, in some consulting work I did with the Arlington Community Foundation, I did some research and wrote a paper on the affordable housing ordinance. So.
Excellent. Next, we've got Danny.
Hi, everyone. Danny Ross. I serve on the Housing Commission. I'm also a project manager at True Ground Housing Partners, formerly known as APA or Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing is what most people know us as. I'm working on the Crystal House project, which is Crystal House 3 and Crystal House 6 are the affordable pieces of that in Crystal City, as well as some other projects with True Ground.
All right, great. And next we have Richard.
Good evening. I'm Richard Tucker. I'm the Housing Arlington coordinator in the Housing Division. I've been in the Housing Division for 6 years. Prior to that, I was in the Planning Division for 17 years. And I actually remember a time before the ordinance, and I was in the Planning Division when the ordinance was adopted. So I go way back.
All right, thank you. And lastly, I'll just briefly cover myself. So, Brian Coleman, I'm currently the chair of the subcommittee. I began work in housing starting off with the NAACP about 2-3 years ago, and I became a member of the Transportation Commission a little over 2 years ago, and recently joined the Housing Commission here for the county. I've studied the Affordable Housing Ordinance since we got a report back, I believe, in 2022 that first detailed the needed changes that were recommended by the county through their Affordable Housing Ordinance review process. I think they were released finally in August of 2023. And I am excited to work with you all because you all come from very experienced and longer backgrounds in this than I can claim, but I think we all bring very important set of skills to this conversation, and I look forward to working with you all moving forward. Next, I'd like to just kind of pivot towards talking about what interests you have in the affordable housing ordinance. So I heard Eric starting off saying that he had been excited to have this conversation about 10 years ago. So I know it's been a while since we've really had discussions over updating the ordinance. So I'd like to start off in a sort of just freer conversation. Whomever would like to go first to kind of talk about their experience with the ordinance. I know there are a few people here who have a lot of knowledge on it, but just to get a quick sampling of your interest in this subject specifically and why you want to be a member of the subcommittee. And so I'll start first. So after reading the report in August of 2023, after it was released with recommendations to reform the affordable housing ordinance, I think it fit into a larger conversation that we were having regarding our supply of housing in Arlington, which has been a concern before then, obviously, but it's one that's become, I think, more of a flashpoint as of late. And I think this fits within a larger conversation of how we're able to balance our need for public good, i.e. affordable housing, with responsibility of developers and businesses that come to Arlington. And I think this is something that we have seen a consistent trend towards a dearth of housing of all kinds, frankly, here, not just in Arlington, but in the country. And so we're excited to get started on a process where we're able to come up with concrete solutions to one facet of this larger conversation. And as I said earlier, this is going to require confirmation through Richmond, but I think we have the expertise necessary to navigate that. And hopefully we'll be able to alter the ordinance in such a way that we're able to get a fair deal and create something that is useful moving forward, and until we may have to revise it again, but we will cross that bridge when we come to it. So I will just popcorn it over to Michelle, and then everyone can kind of take on after there.
So, just a long history with it and a deep commitment to affordable housing policy makes me want to see what we can do to make it right, update it. But in terms of particular issues, when I was working with the Community Foundation on the study, which we did in 2019 and 2020, the issue at that point was primarily that there were no on-site units being created in the base ordinance, and we felt that the cash out dollar amount, which was set by the statute, was not equivalent, or it didn't cover the costs of what we needed to create units. And so, of course, everybody was choosing to buy out of their obligations, and so that was the stimulus, I guess, for getting that report started. But in general, want to see more and better housing policies in Arlington, and yeah, go from there.
All right, thank you. Yes, Eric?
Escape for a minute. All right, I'll raise my hand there. All right, cool. Yeah, so and love that Michelle's here. Nice to see you, Michelle. So there's several reasons. I mean, Michelle spoke to the lack of on-site. That certainly was one of the things that really hooked me into housing many years ago at this point, right? Availability of housing options around the county, diversity of choice. We could talk a lot of other housing issues, but we're going to talk about the ordinance here. So that's an issue, and the gulf between the value of those on-site units, as evidenced through the analysis that staff did, and then the cash contributions and the base density. But I'll give you an example from actually last night, because stories are important. So there is a project that's coming up before the county board, which is Hotel Pentagon. It's Glebe Road and South 24th Street, right at the 395 interchange. Can't miss that. And so that's, I think, proposed for 531 new units right next to a church right there in Green Valley. And so there's a lot of concerns about that level of density. It's if you've ever been to a planning commission, housing commission meeting, right, anything about development, right, there's a lot of things that you're going to work through. But one of the things that the members of the church and some members of the community came last night to speak about was affordable housing, and was the availability of affordable housing choices, specifically in nearby Green Valley, right? And there was a lot of frustration with the fact that this particular project was only going to deliver, I think it increased to 9 because the applicant chose to increase it, but it's going to be 9 on-site units, which is for the bonus density, but then the base contribution, it's going to be about $2 million, right? And so that fits under what the ordinance says. That's commensurate with other projects that we've seen for that size. $2 million is not nothing, right? And you think about how much we're leveraging money through the Affordable Housing Investment Fund per unit, like that shakes out. And yet, we've got a lot of folks who are longtime members of this community saying, hey, like there's a lot of this market rate housing coming in, and like we don't think we're getting a whole lot out of it. Who can afford to live here, right? And you can take all the time you want to try to explain the mechanics of the ordinance and how it works and the history and litigation and everything. But it's just kind of hard to make a compelling argument in 30 seconds about the fact that we're only going to get 9 committed affordable units, and the rest are probably going to be of a decent price, when they come online, if this is constructed in a few years. And so there's a large gulf between what we can achieve, trying to fulfill our goals and live our values, right? And then what they are, right? And what we'd like to see. And so I just tell that because those folks are very frustrated, and I'm frustrated too, for that particular project. Unless the applicant decides on their own to do more, that's what we're going to get for affordable housing. So to me, stories like that really should motivate us to think about, what other tools can we utilize? I'm sorry, I'm being long-winded, so I'll end it with this. I think this is a challenging conversation for the fact that anything that you think about adding to requirements as far as housing, you're going to think about plussing up costs. Somebody's going to be paying for it. Is it government? Is it other people who are getting housing, right? Other renters. And so, it's about balance, right? And so if we were to recommend increasing the level of contributions from developers, what are the negative consequences, right? Because there are no free lunches, as they say, right? And so I think this is a conversation worth having. I'm unsure where it's going to land, but I really think we owe it to the members of our community that really do care about this, who don't go to these meetings all the time, to really push on this and see what else can we kind of get to at least get us closer to our affordable housing goals. Thanks for indulging that long story. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the very thoughtful comments. I did see Matt's hand up first, and then I will put Audrey on the list right afterwards.
Great. Well, thank you. Eric, I think, raised a really good issue and identified a unique tension in the ordinance that I don't think is always spelled out necessarily in the community discussion with most of these projects. One is the base contribution, which most developers choose the option to pay into AHEF, is entirely predictable and transparent, right? Like, it's a number that you plug into a pro forma and developers know exactly how much they're paying, right? But if you're getting bonus density, then it's all part of the community benefits discussion, which is not transparent at all, right? Like, it's going to be some combination of affordable housing, green building incentives, other public priorities, or like public facilities, basically. But what those are going to be isn't typically fleshed out until after SPRC, and it leaves both developers, when they're trying to figuring out the cost of a project, and the community, when they're reviewing it, not entirely sure what's going to come out at the end of the day or what's going into the project. And I think bringing some transparency to the community benefits process, including affordable housing, I think will go a long way. I think in terms of the math for the base contribution, I mean, that's, again, all entirely in statute, and it's something that we'll have to think through, but that's predictable. And then the bonus density piece is entirely unpredictable. So I think that tension leads to some, not necessarily conflict, but leads to some complicated discussions with applicants, staff, and the community.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about the fact that the public good side of it, because of how diverse it is, it lends itself to a sort of complexity that may turn off people, because then they're not sure how to navigate that. Whereas on the other side, it's very clear where you go. It's a formula that you plug in, and you can make sense of it readily. So it's an interesting part of the conversation.
Yeah, and just to add to that real fast, this is one theme I think I'll probably raise throughout this working group is priorities, right? Affordable housing, I think, is considered one, if not the most important priorities for the county, particularly for these redevelopment projects. But it's, part of a larger discussion with sustainability, with infrastructure improvements, all those things which cost real money, and prioritizing those benefits and figuring out what's the most important for that particular project is going to be very important.
Definitely. Audrey?
So I'm interested in older adults, but the other aspect besides affordable housing is affordable assisted living. And outside of Culpeper Garden, we essentially, there's one other that's a nursing home that's affordable. I think it's all public. We don't have a lot of assisted living. Sunrise keeps building buildings, or now they're on hold, but there's no affordable units in those assisted living. And older adults are the fastest growing population in Arlington, and more of them need assisted living. And it's more complicated because there's the cost of the unit, but then there's also the cost of the care, which isn't going to be part of the ordinance. But I'd love us to think about that population as well. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. See, is someone else's hand up? Oh, yes, Danny.
So I'd like to echo what Matt said. I think having predictability for developers is really key, because when you look at whether or not they're going to pay into a contribution or some amount of units, it's easier to do the math on what do I owe, and not have that liability and not have to model it, and so on and so forth, and like in perpetuity or for however long, right? Another component to this is it's incredibly difficult to finance affordable housing. What we use is tax credits, and that still leaves a gap, right? Which is what the AHIF is great at helping to fill. So having a funding vehicle for the AHIF is a critical piece of this as well. And then there's I think it's great, like we said earlier, to have a dearth of different housing options, and certainly having affordable units within a market rate building is a good thing. But it's also a good thing, depending on AMI levels, to have a building where there's also resident services and other things that can help assist people that go beyond just their needs for just a roof over their head.
Yeah. And can you actually thresh out that last part a little bit? Because I think that's really important to kind of speaking a little bit to what Audrey was saying, right? Having a wider range of services and capacities on site to address people in different stages of living and with different abilities. As we try to, as Matt was saying, kind of focus in on maybe more of the housing part of this conversation of public benefit to understand how best we can modify the affordable housing ordinance. I'd like to kind of tease out some more of what you were saying there.
Yeah, so for instance, what we build at True Ground Housing is your typical tax credit development where you've got AMIs at 60% or below, right? And we're included with that is our on-site resident services. That's part of our organization that provides assistance for people. And it's a wide range of things. We have like a savings account match program. We help people learn how to balance a checkbook or file their taxes, any number of things. Typically, we survey our residents and kind of figure out where the needs are and build our resident services from there. But that's just what we do. There's other organizations, AHC, they have resident services programs as well. There's other nonprofits that just provide resident assistance in that space. Like we work with food providers, things of that nature. But those are things that you're not going to get with the market rate inclusionary housing. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes people are in a place in life where they will do well and they will thrive and they'll rise to their environment. But sometimes folks have needs that go beyond, like I said, just providing a roof.
Right, definitely. Thank you. Let's see if there's another hand. If not, can we go over maybe to Jason?
Okay, sorry. Okay, can everyone see me?
Sorry about that. I think I caught you off guard.
No worries. Yeah, I definitely appreciate all the different feedback. I think definitely one thing is important with this is transparency and predictability. But one thing I think is definitely looking at the different trade-offs, because anytime you increase or decrease certain expectations for what's paid into an ordinance to fund certain things, it's going to benefit some people and hurt and could adversely affect others. I think about with how the ordinance is set up. There's different trade-offs. It's like on-site. Would you rather have one affordable unit on-site or two off-site? I don't know. Like obviously, if you're the one person that gets the on-site, you want that. But if you're the second person that it doesn't get housing because we decide to do the on-site at more expensive costs, you're not going to be happy. So there's always trade-offs, and I think this group looking forward to see the different trade-offs, and especially with a renter population. One thing I see, especially with the larger buildings that are constrained with FAR, is that they do have a lot of smaller units, and these units are very affordable. They're below new construction units that often are affordable. AMIs below 100 at like 80%, and I feel like it's weird. There's some irregularities if you have, let's say, a renter at 80% AMI renting a small studio, and then there's a 60% AMI that's subsidized that's larger. You get some interesting dynamics there. So I think there's just some things to think through and make sure that we're costing things appropriately and not having too much adverse impacts.
Yeah, thank you. I think lastly, out of all the commissioners, we have Greg.
Sure. Yeah. So as a representative of a primarily market rate developer and owner, I guess see my role as maybe providing some insight into our lens of how we view the application of the ordinance in practice. I think I'm happy and willing, to the extent I'm able to be as transparent about how those numbers play out in practice. Again, we currently just delivered a project in Ballston that does have on-site affordable units, as well as a cash contribution that we've made, and in fact have just signed leases for those committed affordable units, and then have another project under construction in Roslyn, large project that also has a combination of on-site units and a cash contribution, as well as older projects that were developed in the 2010s and earlier, in which we were just making cash contributions. And then lastly, have also been pursuing projects through the 4.1 process, in which these negotiations are coming up in real time. So we'll try and be more of a sounding board than an active voice, hopefully, and respect a lot of the viewpoints here, and don't want to by any means dominate the conversation, but hopefully can provide, again, some numerical background and some data points for our lens as a private developer who's constructing housing in Arlington County, with some real-time examples. And I do think that certainty and transparency are things we very much value as part of that process.
Thank you so much. And don't worry, I want active participants. There are plenty of very intelligent and opinionated people who will push back if something doesn't pass the smell test. So you don't have to worry about that. So next, I just want to talk briefly about the ordinance charter. I believe everyone received a copy as a part of their invite to the subcommittee. So I think everyone should have the document on hand, just so that we can all kind of take a look at it and just understand the purpose and our timeline on this. So let's see here, Alex, I don't know if you have the ordinance in front of you.
I can share my screen with the ordinance if that works.
Yes, the charter. Thank you.
Or the charter, yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, so here we have our purpose statement. So the intent coming into this is, first and foremost, to have a serious and productive discussion about the affordable housing ordinance and propose changes to it such that it will enable more affordable housing in Arlington and recalibrate the form in such a way that we are able to respond to updated market conditions in alignment with the affordable housing master plan goals. So generally, you can see that outlined in the purpose statement. We are moving forward with the intent to have the county board adopt our recommendations and submit them as a legislative priority for the General Assembly next year. One point here I do want to make a small revision to on timeline at the bottom of the page. Here it says December 2025 as our date of completion on the project, but I would, after some discussion with the housing chair, like to have this done at the latest by November, but preferably by October, So we will have a slightly accelerated timeline, but we'll have a number of meetings between now and then on a monthly basis to discuss not only the history and market changes that have occurred between the ordinance passing in 2005 and now as well as sessions towards the end of the subcommittee's work regarding drafting up a potential change to the ordinance and debating it for the remainder of the subcommittee's time. So that will be the general timeline from now until around August or so. We'll go through the history, look over a number of the contributing factors, and take a look at some of the external examples of which we can possibly adopt or tinker with. And then from August towards October, November, we will draft up a change to the ordinance and debate that until our date to either pass or reject it. So we will be moving along that timeline, which gives us, I believe, a reasonable amount of time to accomplish this. Have any questions or comments about that timeline or the work of the subcommittee?
Quick question, Brian, in the statement. Just, are we planning to meet monthly? Is that the cadence we're thinking?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then I agree with you on timeline. I was going to say that if you were thinking of December, that's typically the deadline to file legislation. So, getting the county board on board and having their legislative hearing and all that stuff, having it done before that is going to be important. So appreciate moving it up.
Yes, definitely. That was a part of our conversation as we were grappling over the timeline, and especially something that we want to be conscious of is making sure that the planning staff and housing staff are on board. So we will also be having conversations with them. We're going to try to loop them in as much as possible. So I appreciate that there are members of housing and planning staff now in our meetings, as well as members of those respective commissions that can help us navigate that process so that preferably by October, we will have a deliverable, but at the very latest November. Because as you said, December is the filing deadline. So we want to make sure that not only the county board is on board with what we are doing and are up to date, but we want to have something that's fleshed out enough and gone through its paces with staff so that as they are having their conversations with the county board, that they are on one accord about what we should be doing moving forward with this. And I saw Eric Berkey's hand up a second ago.
Yeah, thanks. I got a couple questions, Brian. So, as far as any work products that this group may develop, do you imagine? I mean, look, if this group does its job, we're going to have some disagreements because this is tough stuff, right? When we get down to some of the details. So, do you imagine that there may be like voting, like each member may have a vote and ultimately like on certain specifics? I mean, we may just be counting numbers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think
Is that
as
your
we
sense?
get close, yes, I think as we get closer to that point in time, we can discuss how we will develop adoption. So whether or not that is a formal subcommittee vote, which would be by majority, that may be a pathway forward for us. My understanding is that if we are to adopt the document, it would be in its entirety. And so we may disagree on certain aspects of it, but I think that's a conversation perhaps for the future of how we would go about approving each element of the document. So for example, we might have 5 sections, and each section we vote on. That might be one consideration, but that's something that I think we can have a deeper discussion on the later date.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I'll give you my 2 cents. I think this group can have tremendous value in the conversations and the tensions that we flesh out, even if we don't agree. And there's just going to be points where folks don't necessarily agree. And I think the value that we can bring to the county board, hopefully, and other policymakers is just kind of fleshing out those trade-offs and that conversation. So I think that's as valuable as maybe, the actual language of a recommendation. So I would urge, even where there are areas of disagreement, it's really important for us to kind of highlight those and explain why. Because I just think there's likely to be several areas where there's meritorious kind of disagreement about certain approaches, and I think that's where we can really show value. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Oh, one thing I do want to mention before I forget, just on the format of the meetings. So as I said earlier, these are going to be monthly. The way that they'll be held is that every other meeting will be virtual versus hybrid. So given that today's meeting was purely virtual, that means April's meeting on April 15th will be hybrid. I'm not sure if we're able to get the big room on the 3rd floor. Alex, that's something we're able to swing, or we'll be going to the smaller room just adjacent to it.
So we are still in the process of getting a room. We did have a room on the 3rd floor, but there has been some water damage to some rooms, so we're working through that now.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. So we are working through that, but our plan is to be able to have hybrid meetings on every other meeting schedule. So next meeting we will be in person, preferably, but those who have a prior commitment and may not be able to attend in person, please don't feel any sort of hesitancy about letting Alex and I know, and you'll be able to participate virtually as well. So just want to clarify that in addition to the meeting cadence.
Just one note, Brian. We will need a physical quorum in the room. So we will need a majority of the working group itself to be in person. So in-person attendance is important for that reason.
Yes, thank you. And last time I counted, we have, I believe, 13 total members. So that would be the threshold by which we would have to judge quorum. We will send reminders to members, and I will personally email those on the list to try to ensure that we have quorum for our hybrid meetings. So look forward to that. And I think that about covers up the conversation around the charter, unless anyone else has any questions or comments that they'd like to voice about that. All right, hearing none, I believe.
Brian, I just want to jump in and
Yes.
just suggest, and this is something you can probably work with Alex and with the Housing Commission chair, just in terms of, when you bring this in for a landing at that endpoint, if it's October, November, just to be mindful of, what level of broad community review has occurred. So sharing your results with other commissions, and possibly working with like Matt or other developer representatives to make sure that there's a sort of full county community conversation at the end, so that when this is handed off to the board and the idea is this goes to Richmond, that there's sort of a community voice that's sort of been spoken on the whole thing. So just to think about the logistics of, if you have a final drop dead date, working backwards from that is really the thought.
Yeah, thank you for that input. That's something that I discussed with the Housing Commission chair, but that's really important as we are moving forward towards that end date, so that there is a larger community conversation and people have the necessary input before we go to move this towards the board. Yes, Michelle.
Yeah, I'm glad Richard brought that up, because one of the things that has been sort of eating at me during the last part of this discussion is just the history of the ordinance and how we got the ordinance to begin with, which is something that it's very possible that a lot of folks on the call might not be familiar with, but it was an extremely controversial situation that involved lawsuits and, a lot of very, very high level negotiations and discussions. And so, given the weight of that history, I think that we also need to make sure that there is a lot of buy-in across the board for whatever it is that we are asking the county board to move forward with, because that has actually been one of the big barriers to even dealing with this over the years, was that whatever anybody wanted to advocate or lobby for, it wasn't going to happen unless everybody who had a say in it agreed that it should happen. At least that was the understanding over time. Now, whether politics have changed, who knows? But I think that, at least for me, for somebody who's been around for a while, maybe there's some PTSD associated with understanding of that old process. But, so I'd be curious to hear maybe some staff or other folks give their opinions on that element as well. And related to that, will there be a kind of a resource center or a resource page where the staff can post historical documents, like we could share the report that Mary Hines and I did on this, stuff like that?
Yeah, those are all really great points. And I think Russell may be able to speak to that as well. He's been very helpful in trying to compile this information for us for our upcoming meetings as we discuss the history and some of these very important resources. I think really these next few months need to be very intentional about going into that and understanding all of the ins and outs so that we don't replicate those mistakes. I am generally familiar with the controversy around the original passing of the ordinance. So I think with that in mind, we have an obligation, right, to not make those mistakes again, to make this a cleaner process, a more transparent process. And I am appreciative that there are a lot of people on the committee that have that background and can speak to that experientially. So we're able to navigate that more effectively. But Russell, if you can just speak to that a little bit, I think that would be appreciated.
Sure, and a resource page with the documents and everything you need to know. That's definitely something that we're working on, and hopefully have, and we, I think, want to make things available in digestible bits, because there's a whole lot to consume. But before next meeting, we will be posting. I'll work with Alex to get, I'm not sure where, but probably on the Housing Commission webpage somewhere, a resource corner for this group. And I know, Brian, we've talked about, upcoming agendas, and certainly the next meeting, in our conversations, we've talked about focusing really on that history. I've been working to assemble a panel, and I think this is going to be a well-attended meeting by the public probably as well, because we've got some high-profile people who have agreed to be on the panel, who participated in that roundtable back in 2005, and hearing their insights, I think, will be important for you all as you begin this work. So, next month is definitely a don't miss event. We'll be revealing more details as we get closer to that.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all the work you've done, and as well for all the commissioners. If there's something that we've missed, please don't hesitate to tell Russell or I. We want to have as much information there to serve as a contextual background so that we're able to have a more robust process So if there is something you think that we are missing, please feel free to let us know. Matt, yes.
I just want to build off of Michelle's point. I completely agree. It's going to be really important to make sure there's sufficient outreach to all interested parties on this. I'm happy to work with you, Brian, and staff on getting, briefings to NAOP. I know they'll be very interested because they're the people who will be implementing whatever comes of this. And, I think starting the working group is a great first step for sure, because, last year there's the Green Building Incentive Policy update, and it resulted in NAOP and the Sierra Club writing letters in December asking staff to slow down. So you don't want a situation where you have the builders and the affordable housing group on the same page about something needing to be delayed. So it's very important to get everyone lined up and take care of outreach. So I commend you for starting this, and at some point, happy to have NAOP happy to have you all brief NAOP.
All right, thank you so much. And yes, that's definitely something we want to avoid. We don't want to get to the vote and then we can't count how many people are on board. So I think that's something that we as a diverse group can really benefit from, is being able to leverage our own existing networks and communicate out information to the relevant groups, bring them to the table so that everyone's on the same page as we're especially getting towards the latter parts of this conversation. All right. And just checking, see if there's any more comments. If not, I will give you all back 6 minutes of your evening and call for this meeting to be adjourned.
Thank you and good evening, Brian.